Well, good morning, everybody. Nice to be back with you here. Mike Fairbourn sitting in for Ben Watson as we've got trading futures. Look forward to our discussion today. Plenty to look at in this increased volatility environment. We've seen some volatility increase on the ES recently and a number of the different market futures indices. We'll take a look at that in more detail as we dive into things here. Would like to welcome you. Uh, Plenty of you here today. Nice to see you all back. And I am joined in the chat by my, I should say, co-manager here, Scott Thompson. Great to have Scott on board with us, folks. Any questions, comments you have, definitely throw those into the chat box as well. And do encourage you to subscribe to our channel. You can do that in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. All right, folks, well, let's dive on into it. Plenty to look at this morning. So first off, let's take a look at some disclosures here. So futures and futures options trading does involve substantial risk. It's not suitable for all investors. Now, there is a risk disclosure statement for futures and options. Please read that prior to trading futures products. Some additional points listed there on futures. Wanted to also note that Charles Schwab Futures and Forex LLC is a CFTC, Registered Futures Commission Merchant, and NFA Forex Dealer member. Some additional notes here. The information here is for general information purposes only and should not be considered an individualized recommendation or personalized investment advice. The paperMoney software application is for educational purposes only. Schwab does not recommend the use of technical analysis as a sole means of investment research. Investing does involve risk, including for some products more than your initial investment. Now, a key point here to finish up our disclosures is that stop orders are not guaranteed in execution. Due to exchange rules based on certain conditions at the time of activation, the exchange may reject or substitute an exchange-designated limit order for the originally triggered market order. So with that, let's jump on into it and take a look here at how the markets are shaping up. All right, so a quick note here, and we do use the ATR. You guys are familiar with that on our pivot trades. I was looking at those this morning. I'm going to dive into those fairly quickly here. But a quick note on that, just to highlight this, if we do take a look at an ATR, the average true range, just off our main view here, I want to highlight this. And you'll notice over here that the ATR on a daily chart has begun to spike higher. Now, a couple of interesting things can happen when you do get an ATR spike like this, when volatility is increasing. It really did begin over here with that interest rate cut. There was an expectation of 4 cuts originally for 2025 and 2026. Well, now we're down to 2 for each of those, and that was perceived by the market to not be as welcome. Prices dipped. There could have been some other news related to it, but that was kind of the main headline that we'd seen over there with that decline. With that spike, volatility has continued to increase. Now, a lot of times volatility, the last volatility spike that we saw came, it stopped above the 100 level in terms of an ATR using the standard default here of 14. Okay, notice that we did have a drop over here at that point, which is similar in size to our drop right over here. Now the question is, will we have the secondary decline and an extension of maybe, which happens oftentimes, a volatility bump up towards that higher level? So that's kind of the question mark. Will we get that? And that's what some traders could be looking at here. So I'm going through this because you might want to consider, as we're looking at short-term sort of intraday moves on a shorter-term time frame, what might be happening on a larger-term chart too, and always getting, a sense of where prices might be relative to that short-term time frame. What's the longer-term trend doing? Final note on this before we go in any further, and we'll look at our shorter-term time frames here, is what we might be getting. Pull this back down. What we might be getting in terms of a short-term scenario here. Now, some traders might look at this as the possibility of, and I know many of you might see this, but do you see a bit of a pattern unfolding here? Let me use Thinkorswim drawing tools to highlight this. First, so here is our diagonal line. Now, off the top, you can see us coming down, and it's pretty clear we've got about a couple different touch points, but possibly 3 touch points off the top. Now, off the bottom, if we're still using those lower the lower lines, the wicks of the candle, we can see that we might be getting somewhat of a symmetrical triangle. A lot of times I might draw off the bottom and then use the bodies of the candle, which you can see right there. We dipped below that yesterday, and we're kind of in this range where we might potentially break up or break down. A lot of times traders are looking for the direction of the trend for the breakout. Now, the longer term trend, as you can see, there's a 1 year, 2 year. I mean, this trend does continue on. If I go to a 2 year, you'll see something very similar, a very long extended trend. So the expectation of some traders might be a breakout above this symmetrical triangle. A lot of times, if you get that at the end of a kind of a run up, sort of like a bull flag, but you get a bit of a pennant pattern, and those oftentimes can take the shape of a triangle. Now, that's the question. Now, will we break up or break down? Of course, we can continue going sideways as well into the vertex of the triangle line. So just some points to note here. One thing I did want to point out that we can look at today is because we are coming towards the bottom. The last time we came down to the bottom of that triangle, perceived triangle here, right here, here, and here, we did a bounce. And we saw a little bit of that today on the ES. There's a little bit of a test and then the possibility of a recovery here. Even this very, very short move, it's small right here. It is a small move between the upper trend line and the lower trend line. If, in fact, folks, we got a bounce there, that's still likely enough to fulfill, let's say, a pivot point bounce. So if we do see a pivot unfolding, a bounce off of one of the pivot lines, we might bounce off and retest again because we have tested 1, 2, 3 times off the top. We might make it up there, and prices might flow in the direction of the underlying long-term trend as we go higher. Now, another quick note too, you're going to see this to a degree. We did not make a new low, and anytime we don't make a new low, let me just clear these lines off real quick. Actually, I'm going to keep that main line on as a reference point because that will still show up on our pivots. Let me draw this here too. Sometimes these reversals can happen around a shoulder, head, shoulder. Now, I know it's small and I have to put a question mark after that last shoulder, but we might actually get a bounce there. And if we did, this would be a break above the neckline. And then the trajectory or the price target would be simply a range off of this bottom to this top, this range here, drawing the whole pattern. And then we take this price range right there and we add that to the breakout. Now, that's just one potential scenario. Got to put a question mark there because that if we do see that unfold, I'm just letting you know that's where the general projection is, the key projection for a head and shoulders. This is an inverted head and shoulders pattern, though. Okay, you see it actually a little bit more clearly over here on the NQ. So this can help us give us some sense of where prices could be going. I'll actually take it down to 1 year. There we go. We'll zoom in. There you go. It's still a lower low, but shoulder, head, shoulder, will we get a bounce? That's the question. So, but it just gives you a general reference in case you just see prices start to move. There might be more to this rally towards the end of the year. I should say into the new year. All right, we're already past the old year. All right, so let's do this. Let's take a look at, let's go forward here and break this down a little bit further into the ES itself. Now, initially what we'll want to do is we want to take a futures market overview. Let me take off these Fibonacci's for now, and let's just see where we stand looking at the 4 markets here. So again, we've got this set up, ESNQ, we've got the YM and the RTY or the Russell. So you got the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, the Dow, as well as the Russell over here. Now, where are we sitting? There's only, we're trying to doing some quick comparisons on an intraday basis. These are all 1-day, 5-minute charts. Which of these is the strongest given our scenario or the weakest, whichever side we want to trade? You can see over here that the YM seems to be holding up the best. In fact, these are the center pivot lines, or just the main pivot line that we're taking a look at here as our reference. And we are above that level. Now, oftentimes, if you're below that level, it tends to be weak. In fact, we've talked about the Fibonacci bounce in this class. That would be a bounce to the downside if you're below the center pivot, or above if you are above. We've only got one that would qualify there. That would be the YM. So I'm just going to hit a plus here right now as it stands. That would be the strongest. The weakest, you'd have to say, is probably going to be the ES or the RTY. We're both clearly below our center pivot point here, as you can see drawn in. So this is just really helpful on a big picture perspective, because where are we going to see strength? Where are we going to see weakness? Possibly now intraday. Because a lot of times the strength that you're seeing on an intraday chart, or a short-term chart, I should say, when you see that strength, that can follow through to the end of the day. Some traders will look at that if you start to see strength. Now, there is a caveat here, and that is the first 30 minutes of the day, because we did have an economic announcement today. And of course, we're back to earnings. And so a lot of times, I'll go into a 5-minute chart. I've got a daily 60 and a 5 set up here. Let's go into ES to pull that up right now. But a lot of times what we're doing is we're waiting for, actually, let me do this. I'm going to flip this over to, see the 60-minute here? I'm going to just change this right now, because this is just much more relevant for that 30 minutes of the day. And I'm going to go ahead and click on a 30-minute, and I'm actually going to resave this grid. Save grid as. Now, if anybody wants this grid, and you find it helpful, well, not this. This one's just kind of a 3 time frame, but the other grids, I can share those, and I can have those saved under the description or YouTube as well, under the more section for those that might be watching this in the archives. I'll be sure to put that down there. I was thinking specifically the pivot points. This is just a standard kind of a 3 chart scenario here. I'm going to jump back into our 30-minute. There we go. And the first 30 minutes of the day, so we've got a 30-minute bar here, just to kind of highlight this. But this bar, we've got a little bit of time to see what does happen. And a lot of times traders will wait. They'll wait to see what happens after that first 30 minutes, because thus far, well, we've got a bounce off that level. But, the next 30 minutes could tell us quite a bit. That's still at 1 hour. So let me just jump back to that. I'm just looking at it. All I changed was the 30-day. I've got to resave it real quick. Save grid as. It's just throwing this on my other screen right there. These are really helpful to have. Okay, there we go. Now we got a 30-minute, and that looks a lot better. So yeah, let's see. Anyways, that first 30-minute time frame. We can also look over here at a 5-minute. I can just highlight this here for you too. But giving it a little bit of time just to get past those economic announcements. What happens with earnings? How does the market perceive those earnings? It can impact the S&P 500 and lend direction to it. So there is that longer term trend line. Can we break up above that level and continue higher? Wow, interesting. So we've got that. We know that we're below that center pivot point, but we could get a price force, I should say a short-term bounce, possibly, breaking up through that pivot point. But I just wanted to highlight that first 30 minutes of the day, on a 5-minute. So we're looking at 7:30. We can extend this over here to 8, giving the market a chance, unless you have some really strong indications that you think prices are going to go higher. Normally in this class, we'll just take the trade because we want to get some trades under our belt, but waiting for that first 30 minutes can be helpful. Now, generally, just as a quick note, in terms of the direction for the rest of the day, you take the low of the 30-minute, whatever that time frame might be, and then you take the high of the 30-minute, right? And this is just, what we're seeing right here, but do prices then break above that high or below that high? And that can help to determine the short-term trend for the day, or the day's trend, is how some traders would use that. Again, this is all happening within that 30-minute time frame right there. So that's just a technique that some traders will use to determine, bullishness or bearishness down below. Bull or bear. Nothing's 100%, but they like to do it, because a lot of them do, because it helps to give them a general sense of direction. All right. Let's see. I'm going to take a look for any questions before let's zoom into our pivot points, and we'll take a look at that in just a second. So we looked and we saw there's weakness in the ES, but there was strength in the YM. Let's take a look at that here just a second. But any questions? I think we're all set. Okay. Well, good morning to all of you. Thanks for joining us. All right, folks. And again, definitely consider giving Scott and I a follow on X. My handle is Mike Fairbourn CS, and Scott's is simply Scott Thompson CS. All right, with that, let's go ahead and take a look. So over here, the YM, as we saw from the overview, had the most strength, and there you go. It was the only one that was going above the center pivot point. Now, we can wait and we can see what happens over this time frame as we're waiting for the YM to just kind of tick forward and to go over here. I'm wanting to see if my charts are updating. I'm showing connected, I'm showing real time. I just haven't seen a change yet in the YM. I have to be in the paperMoney account to execute trades, but I'm not seeing it ticking, which is not good. It stopped kind of right at the opening market. I may need, folks, I may need to do a refresh on this. Let me just see if I can come over here and see if we've got any changes. We've got changes. I just saw some changes down here in some of our other futures contracts, as you can see listed below. But some appear not to be moving. Interesting. I don't know why that is. Have not ever run into that, but that's okay. We can. Let me just try to refresh it, okay, real quick. We'd normally never have to do this, especially during our discussion, but let's get this going. Oh, that's right. I'm sorry, folks. It's an early day. The markets are closed. We're not going to get that entry. We're going to talk about it on a big picture perspective. That's right. I'm not used to this. The markets are closed for the Jimmy Carter, um, uh, funeral is what it is. Yep. Okay. All right. This is it's an off day. You don't run into this too much. I'm opening back up the future because we're going to go through just the process of discussing it right now. Okay. So let's just do this. Let's take a look. And I have that marked on my calendar. I knew that, but for some reason, I'm waiting for those futures to move. Folks, the market isn't going to be moving today. And so it's a reminder to all of us here. All right. Yeah. So other futures contracts are open, but not the main market. And that's why that's moving. Okay. Thanks so much, Scott, for that note as well. And that's why you've got some of them moving and the others don't. And that was kind of a little bit of my source of confusion because you do have, I saw them, some of these were going, and you did see the activity here. So there was just kind of an assumption that it would continue. It didn't. Good. Anyways, you've got a little bit of a breakdown as to what to look for going forward. Now, the other aspect that what we have here is we do go through and we look at the futures metals overview. And guess what? We're getting some activity on the futures metals because they are in fact open. And this is actually the one I was looking at today, which kind of threw me off a little bit. I did look at the micro gold. We'll pull that up here in just a bit, but you can see the strength of the metals. And we've actually got gold, we've got silver, and we've got HG down here, which is copper. And finally, we do have PL, the platinum futures, and that is the weakest of the three markets right now. Before we dive into that, I did want to take a look at each of these, just going through and looking at the daily chart, for example, on them. Okay, so taking a look at gold right here, gold's been holding up. By the way, one quick reason why gold might be showing strength, and we actually bounced yesterday, a couple of days back, is the House chair for the Republicans that is going to be in the controlling House, or going forward as well, has stated that there's not going to be any cutbacks at all for any of sort of the programs in the government, right? Now, they might try to reduce some programs out there, but other programs, I'm just thinking in terms of like Medicare, Social Security, along those lines, no cuts, no changes there whatsoever. That means more spending, and more spending. A lot of times, if there's more spending, more deficits, what that can mean is gold prices can be showing strength. And so that's what could have sparked the gold price, kind of getting us off this spot. And there was a lot of talk about that. Would this be a higher low? We still don't know if it will continue that way. But over here, that is a higher low thus far. Will we continue over here to make a higher high? The reason why I point this out is because that could be a driver. On a short-term basis, we do have a higher high, higher low right there. And we could start to break out and move higher through this point or not. So let's just see what does happen here with gold. One quick note on gold for individuals that are looking at this on a daily chart that could give some indication of additional strength, more bullishness they might be focusing in on as a break there. Notice on the ES we had this shorter term. I'm just going to draw that off the bodies of the candles on both. A shorter term triangle. This is really quite a bigger, longer term possible triangle coming in here, as you can see, and we're looking at maybe bouncing off that level, but again, this could be like a longer term sort of a pennant pattern on gold too. You see it? There's your zigzag over there. And so possible breakout here or here could lend direction. Again, traders are looking for the trend to the upside, and that trend has clearly been up. The trend is up, right? So it's an upward trend, and will it break to the upside or not? That remains to be seen still. Okay, so there we go. That's kind of our scenario. That's our setup there. Bigger picture. So I'm going to keep this trend line coming down, and we'll be able to see that as we go through now and take a look at our pivot points, specifically for our metals markets, which are clearly up. And by the way, so is oil, as mentioned. Yeah. So looking at this right here, this is kind of our scenario and setup. Now, taking a look at the pivots in terms of a possible trade on the pivot points, what we would have here, this is our main pivot point. Again, this is an R1 and an R2 up top. Oh, R2 up top. The trades might be placed between an R1, because we're bullish right now. We're seeing some strength between the R1 and the R2 in terms of a break back up above this level. Now, what's interesting is we did break back up above this level initially, and then we had dipped lower. So there could have been a trade here. Now, a lot of times traders will try to put on the plus, let's just say +1 up top here, a -1 up here as an exit, right? That's the trade. This is bullish. If some traders will look to trade a pivot point this way. Now, one of the reasons why they'll do this is because there's also a trend at stake here, an underlying trend. If you're up near the R1 level, then the trend is likely to be to the upside, right? Because you're testing above the key pivot point range, and then to the R2 level up top here. So we've got the R1, the R2. Sometimes if there's a wide range between here, traders may in fact decide to do, especially, let's say, for example, if it pauses near this prior high, they might look at a 50% level here. And they might say, well, if it kind of struggles or starts to break down a little bit, they might decide to do the exit over here at the 50% mark. So that's a consideration to look at as well. I wanted to look at SI in contrast. Now, SI simply had confirmed above that level. It tested and it broke back up above. So the trade itself is if you're below the R1 level and then you get right back up above it, the potential trade here we're talking about would be an entry here with a potential exit at the 50% level or up above. We had one this morning. Let's see, that was actually pre-market. So normally in this class, we're waiting for the market to kick in gear right at 7:30 my time. And that would be your next bar. We would have slightly missed the entry here if we were looking for one tick above that level, but some traders could have still potentially taken that. So that's an interesting pattern here. It's on a short-term basis, on a short-term chart, but that is a Morningstar pattern here, or Morningstar-ish, I would say, which is showing some strength too. But let's go back and look at gold here. So as we look at this, we don't know for sure if we're going to get a pullback and a test here. That could be interesting if we were to get like let's say a mild or a moderate, I'll go full screen, a moderate pullback to this level, okay? Because then we could potentially take an entry here with an exit here or here up top at the R2. So the possibility of a pullback. Now, a quick note, we are above the VWAP right there. So this is the volume weighted, that's hang on, I'm sorry. Volume weighted average price. Another indication of strength. In the vast majority of cases, I've only seen like a handful where we're really not above the VWAP and we're up near the R1 level. Okay, so that all else equal, a lot of traders would look at this as a positive. Okay, so we're above that level as well. I might just want to go through the process of putting through a trade anyways, just to kind of show you, but technically we are looking for a bounce to come off here and then a move to the upside. Now, we hadn't talked about where the potential exits would be yet. Many of you might not be familiar with that, but we use an ATR and normally looking at a 1.5 to a 2 ATR. So as you come over here and we take a look at that, so about 230, it's in that range, 230, 225. So maybe a 450 if we're using a 2 times ATR stop on that. So potential 450. We might actually get a dip down below there at this point, but yeah, so 2 ticks above the R1 level with a 4.5 ATR potential exit. I'm going to draw my line down here. 4.5, ooh, puts us in an interesting spot. It's right near that lower test and just below, or just above, I should say, the volume weighted, the VWAP line. So some traders might wait because sometimes you'll get a bounce off the VWAP. Take a look over here. They might put a stop if it's that close below that VWAP level. Okay, so here is our pullback. Let's go ahead and get this scenario kind of set up here for us in our active trader. Now, before I do that, actually, we got just a bit of time. How much, if you haven't looked at it already, how much does that gold move in terms of upward move, downward move, the single contract? Over here, a dime here on the minimum tick value is 10. Okay, so that's, just be mindful of that. A dime up or a dime down is a $10 move. It goes in either direction. There's your margin requirement as well as it stands right there for that move. Now there is a micro, which is a tenth of that value. It's just MGC. And I'll pull MGC up right now, and you can see MGC coming in at $1 as opposed to $10. So some traders might use this, and they might use 2 contracts to get maybe 2/10 of what the normal GC would be. GC contract, of course, that's additional commission. You need to be mindful of that as well. But you can see the margin requirements are a lot less for that as well. That's the MGC right there. And I'm going to go ahead and we can look at either one of those two. There's the MGC or the GC. Wanted to just reference that before we put the trade on. We bounced off that a little bit, that level. Let's go ahead and get this set up for a potential trade just to show you what that would look like. Assuming that, let's just say we did take a bounce. It wasn't quite 2 ticks off that level. It was dang close to it. But I still want to put one on just to go through the process of it. So I'm over here using active trader off to the far right-hand side. So within that active trader, I'm going to drop this down. And what I'm going to do is we'll just do a single contract with, we could just do the main GC, for example. Just the gold futures contract. It's not the micro. Okay, that we looked at earlier. It's not the MGC, the E-micro gold futures. It is the gold futures. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this out just on a single contract. I'm going to go down to, I've got this listed down here, and you can save this. I'm going to show you how to do this because this is very important to have this down. I have a couple of these set up. I've got standard ranges for 2 contracts or for 1. If I just go with the single here, notice the default here puts my offset kind of like a potential target and a potential stop entry point at 1. If I start to change this and hit tab, it puts this little icon over here where I can make adjustments to that. And I can customize an order. I can click on that and I can name it after I've set it up. Now I've already customized an order on one leg. It's just a single contract. I should have just said single contract, but there you go. 10 of each. And what that does, it just provides an offset from my entry point off of each of these right here as we're coming down to that level now. Let's zoom in on that. Okay, so what we could do is we can set this up at like a 2 tick would be just slightly above there. Let's say it's about right at, oh, you can actually scoot this over. We actually have an entry point right there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wait for prices to get above back above this level if it breaks higher. Because my pivot point, as you can see up above, right here, where's my main pivot point? It's at 2691.9, and the entry then would be 2691. Let's see, 9, right at just 2 ticks above. So I'm over here, right here. So I can set this up. I'm going to click on send, and you can see, oh, and it actually just triggered because it just hit 2 ticks above that level. So that worked out nicely. Now here is our potential target, and that target I can set again. I could go to 50%. I'm going to go just 2 ticks below the R2 level at this point in time. Click on send and send that through. And remember our exit. Now we can consider this, like I said, potential exit level in terms of the stop. We mentioned stops earlier in our disclosures, but do we put that below this level, or do we shoot for that 2 ATR, which is just slightly above? It's so nice you can just drag and drop that right there. Let's just go with our original 2 ATR, which was very close to this range. I've just kind of eyeballed it, folks, but you can pull that up and we can get that in place. But right now we're looking for a bounce trade, an extension going higher through here off this level up to this point to the R2 level. Now, a quick note on this too. As we look at this, one thing I can do, I'll scoot this over to the side, but one thing I can do is I can come over here and I can click on my Fibonacci's, the Fibonacci drawing tool, which is right down below. You see that? I'm just, good quick way to get to that. Just highlighting it down here. Click on it, go to your percent. It does say Fibonacci retracement. Take a look up top. I'm going to just pull this down, and that's going to give me my 50% level. Oh, right there. So it's right here. If you wanted to kind of highlight it and have a level in place, and watch what I'm going to do now. I'm going to go back down to my drawing tools, go to my diagonal line, and I'm going to point. I could actually do this. We'll go to just a standard line here, and there's my 50% level. I'm going to click on that, click one more time, right click, and I'm going to change these properties so we can see it a little bit easier on a backdrop here. And in fact, I'm going to widen those guys up a little bit too. All right. So there is your 50% level using Fibonacci to help us. Now I'm going to erase those fibs right now. So do you see that? That is just above these highs, and that could be a potential area to take that off if, in fact, we wanted to. All right. So that is the scenario. That's the setup. I wanted to show you some of the saved orders that you could have over here, but then also additional ways to, potentially set up a possible stop order, potential stop range or a stop order, and a limit order. And the nice thing about this is when you're on the chart, it's a simple drag and drop. So if I thought for some reason that we were going to, I saw on the chart that we were kind of bouncing around these prior highs, I could simply just pull down here and let go. And boom, I'm right at the 50% level. So I've adjusted my target there. I can pull it back up here, do the same thing. Okay, so we've got that one under our belt. Any questions on that? I'm going to take a look at the chat and we'll go from there. Let's see. Yeah, exactly, guys. Hey, that threw me off. It really did. Because I was a little bit off-centered. I'm thinking, okay, we're trading pre-market, but then we stop on the major market indices. That threw me off a little bit, I'll be honest with you, especially as I was watching the other futures go. But there you go, the main futures markets. Because I have seen markets close, but the futures market open even on the market indices. That's happened before. So it is interesting to note. But anyways, yeah, the coffee, or I actually have cacao in the morning sometimes. This is an early futures class, and I've been up looking at it. That would have been a nice one to take a look at. But there we go. Let's see. Oh, that was for Scott. Wiley had one for Scott, and I think we're good. Scott's got us caught up here. Is the oil moving, huh? Oil. Let's take a look at oil here. There is some tension in the Middle East. Oh, gosh, I was way up. I had to scoot on down. A few more chats have come through, but a few of those I wanted to look at. Is there a link for the pivot points? I'll tell you what, let's do this. The pivot points over here, as we get our next bar coming in, let's go ahead and just, I'll share with you. I'm going to go back to the main, well, the pivot points itself, just this scenario, this setup here for pivot points, that just has our standard, starts with the ES. Of course, you could just change whatever symbol you've got. Yeah, what you want to do to add that, first of all, you can come over here, you can click on Edit Studies, and it's just simply the pivot points right here. So just type in pivot points. You've got it up top right there. Double click on it. And well, I've got one. I don't need two. I've actually got the volume weighted average price as well. We did a full discussion on that. Well, a little while back, but that's all you've got. Now, on this is a quick note. If you click on it, normally in this class, we don't look at the R3 or the S3. And by the way, as a default, those are taken off, but they've got colors, etc. in here. You're going to want to make sure that the rest of these they have the show plot on. Now, if it helps you with this ATR on here and the VWAP, folks, I'm just going to share this anyways in the chat just so you have it. It might just be something you can import very quickly, but I wanted to show you where it was at. What is this? You can on. Fine. Oh, I'm just going to say, well, yeah, let's put it in. Pivot points. I don't think I put a space in there. There we go. Now I'm going to put this into the chat so you have it. It's not a think script, so it's just simply a chart. Okay. All right, so let's do that. Oh, yeah, some unintentional comedy there, Wiley, as I was in a bit of a panic mode when futures stopped trading. When they're supposed to continue. All right, and let's see. Ambrose says, how did you get the buy and sell screen at the right-hand side? Now, if you're not seeing this, Ambrose, this is a good question. Your font might be too big. And I've had that happen, but it is the active trader. Do you see this over here? Active trader. I'll point to it as well. Active trader right over there. You've got to click on that active trader to pull that guy up. And when you do, voila, it's right there. Now, if you're not seeing this right-hand column, it might be that your fonts are too big. You can click on the setup, and we can click on application settings, and we can go over here into let's see, look and feel. And I'm on the larger font size. If you're too big, like extra large, it might not even show it at all. I've run into that before. So that's where you could fix that at. Link is broken. Is that right? Hang on a second. Let me just take that link, and I'm going to show you where we put that link in. I'm going to go to my setup, open shared items. Okay, that's what you do, setup, open shared items. If you're on a Mac, you're going to see setup up there as well. It just might be as a gear. Control V, paste that in, preview. There's my pivot points, import, and it popped up right there. That's the process you got to follow, MS Street, to get those pivot points on. Okay, the link is working though. Oh, thank you. It says AT. The tab says AT. Thank you for that, Fitness. Good points. Folks, if you like today's presentation, if you find this helpful, this useful, this kind of content, definitely consider subscribing to our channel. Quickest way to do that, bottom right-hand corner of the screen. Love to have you on board. We have over 125, 130,000 subscribers already to our channel. Love to have you on board. If not, and if you find this helpful, definitely smash the like button. I would love to see those if you find this kind of content informative, useful for this class. Let's go back to our gold. Let's keep tabs on gold here and see what's going on. Well, we're right back to our level, aren't we? So we had one bar up, one bar down. What's interesting about these pivot points is it is showing us some support or resistance at that level. Interesting. These pivot points are built on the prior day's data. And they're shot forward based upon a calculation. I'd be happy to send that out as a tweet later on to show you guys that. But there you go. The whole idea is a breakout, an extension up to the range or to the 50% level as we talked about, but they can offer support and resistance. We got a nice bounce off there and we failed thus far. Now, did we hit our stop level? Not yet. Not yet. So we'll see what we get as that does unfold here, but still some volatility. Again, if it's too volatile, there might be a micro futures contract in terms of the amounts that you're getting to the upside and the downside. That's where those micros can be very, very helpful. I mean, it was a $10 move per dime here. A dime on the micro micro gold futures was just $1. So a lot less of a movement up or down. Okay, let's take a look at silver as well. This could be silver was our strongest gold, or excuse me, our strongest metal contract as we set this up. But silver down here too, some indications that there were some support at that level or resistance, and then resistance initially, and then correlated to that is oftentimes support. So keep an eye on silver if you're looking at silver here, the possibility of a bounce, but it too has a potential setup. All right. Yes. Oh, and by the way, Will, there are other discussions on the pivot points. In fact, the playlist itself, I think Ben, Ben who teaches this class, has posted those previously. Let me go ahead and do this real quick and just highlight it. I'm going to go ahead and just go into our channel here and highlight where you can find that under playlists right here, because there are full discussions on the pivot point specifically. Let me just go ahead and quick find do a futures here. Futures, there we go. One more. There we go. Right down here. No, that's spotlight on futures. We've got more. There we go. Trade futures. All right. Let's click on that. Here is the playlist. I'm going to share it. Okay, there we go. So I filled in for Ben a little bit, but there are some futures, pivot points specifically discussed here in great detail. For example, this one here would be, I could say specifically, a breakdown on those. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and post this into the chat box so you have that as well. Okay. All right, everybody. Well, that was a breakdown on futures, and you got a chance to see the markets not continuing for the market indices themselves over here. The markets are closed today, but we do have many of the futures that are still open. If that's not confusing, it would traded pre-market and immediately stopped, but these continued on. We did take a trade today, pivot point trade on gold. We'll keep eyes on that. I'm going to take a look at that throughout the day as well as take a look at those metals that are open and, of course, oil markets as well, folks. But it was nice being here with you today. Look forward to future discussions and plan to see Ben Watson very shortly, perhaps next week. So on that note, folks, have an awesome rest of the day. Thank you so much, Scott, for your help in the chat. It was a great job. I really appreciate him as a manager as well. All right. Take care, everybody. See you next time.